Thanks for being here. It's a great pleasure to be here in London. Haven't been to London for many years. Uh, it's always hard to get into DevOps. Mark was just telling me they're politely declining 85% of the talks proposals. So I'm very happy and honored to be here. My name is Bertrand Delacretaz. I come from the French-speaking part of Switzerland. I work for Adobe as a principal scientist in the content management space. And Adobe is a very federated company. So even though people go to office, many people in Adobe go to an office, in the end, you end up working with people from different offices. So de facto remote teams. I'm also active in the Apache Software Foundation. I'm on the board of directors, been maybe my 12th term, I'm not sure, more than 10 at least. I've been involved in Apache since the early 2000s, so for a long time already. I'm not as young as I used to be, so consider that experience maybe. And this talk is about distributed teams that actually work. I'm not sure if I have all the answers, but I think I'll at least help you ask the right questions. And with some experience, we're going to have some time for Q&A at the end. So if there's topics that I don't address, feel free to ask. This is more oriented towards the team's efficiency, the mechanics of getting a team to work. I won't speak much on the social, emotional, personal aspects of that. I'm more focusing for this talk on the mechanics of getting a team to work. And I'll start by a story. You will learn that I like to tell stories. Hopefully they are useful. And this is a story about building a dam. It's not a digital asset management. It's a real dam on a river to stop the water. I was in a camp, kind of a campground, maybe 15 years ago with my family. And the campground manager asked us, could you build a dam on my river? He had a river that was eating his terrain, and so he had another one dug, and he wanted to, change the water so it goes into the other trench. And he asked us, can you build a dam? We never did that. And we were here with a bunch of young folks, maybe teenagers. Can we do that? Yes, we did it. We got together. We had no clue how to do it, but we knew the goals. We knew what we wanted to achieve. We communicated efficiently among us, a small team co-located in the same place, not in the same boat, but in the same river. And we did it. And, you start putting wood and then stones and stuff, and it starts working. What I want to tell you by this is that we are wired as humans. We are wired to collaborate. I think we work best in tribes. And this is a perfect example of a tribe. Everybody in the river trying to build a dam without knowing exactly how it works, but with a collective wisdom we get there. And I think the main challenge of distributed teams is how can we reproduce this in a remote setting. It's not ideal. Of course, we would like to be all in the same place, around the coffee, discuss things, play darts, whatever, team building and stuff, and then do great work because we know each other very well and we communicate very well. It's hard, and that I'm sorry, but that will be my main message. It is difficult, but hopefully I have some tricks and tools to help. I've been fascinated by the power of open source communities since I started getting involved in open source in the early 2000s. I think the open source teams create some of them, create incredibly good software without a real well-defined process, without a boss, without management, and it works because the collaboration works. So I've been studying that, and I gave a number of talks, and each of these previous talks, this is probably the first one I did in 2008. Open source collaboration tools are good for you. And each of these talks was focusing on a specific aspect of that problematic. And this one is more on the tools. Then I had another one in 2016, which was called I Will Not Attend Your Meeting. I'm an open source person, being a bit provocative, in my company, if you want me to attend a meeting, you have to convince me. What's this meeting about? Do we have an agenda? How can I prepare? And if not, I might not join. And I think it's good to be a bit reluctant because, as we'll see, meetings are expensive. And then I looked a bit more on the asynchronous decision making, which I think is a key element of getting a remote team to work properly. And we'll have a section on that. How can we make decisions without meeting together, even without being synchronously in connection? Doing all asynchronously when you're efficient, when your time zone allows, and so on. So this was 2017, not so long ago. And then I also looked at the multicultural aspects. I was just discussing that with someone over coffee. People from London know that. Interacting with people from different cultures, different mother tongues, it's not always easy. In Switzerland, we have 4 official languages, and this means 4 cultures. If you have a different language, it does influence your culture. So we're kind of used to that, and in the IT world today, it's very international, so we are getting used to that. But it's hard. It's another challenge. Sometimes you think you understand each other, but you don't. How can we cope with that? And then I also looked at clarity and conciseness in writing. If you're working in a remote team, a lot happens in writing. You communicate mostly in writing, or I think that's where it's really efficient. So you have to work on your writing, make it efficient, and we'll have some examples and help on that. So these are the challenges. So I said, hopefully I can bring some, not solutions, but at least tools to help cope with these challenges. The multiple cultures, the concision when we write, the language. English is not my mother tongue, and for many of us it's the same. So you have to communicate in a language that's not your own. Communication is hard. Async decisions are very important. Channels, which channel you use to collaborate. Is that Slack? Is that Git issues? We'll talk about that. And the time zones, of course, which get in the way. And even if there were no time zones, everybody has their own rhythm. Some of us work well in the morning, others work well at night, and it's great to be able to cope with that. It makes us more efficient. If I can work when I'm good, then I'll be efficient. If I can work when you tell me, maybe I won't be as good. So it's an important concept. And I think coping with these challenges makes us better at teamwork. Even if we co-located that, we can take the best aspects and help us be more efficient. So I think that's really useful. Let's tackle the first one and get it out of the way, meetings. As you have already maybe perceived, I'm not a big fan of meetings. I've known for that in my teams. I'm actually not a big fan of boring and inefficient meetings. If you're around a whiteboard with people that you trust and you're improvising some technical design and conception, it's fantastic. I also play music, and I compare that to, playing jazz, improvising jazz with people that you trust. You just play and you flow and it goes. And that can be a super efficient meeting, super valuable. But very often our meetings are not like that. You have the status meeting where you sit there for 28 minutes, and for 2 minutes you tell others what you're doing, and they could have found that out in the issue tracker. So why are you doing that? Some kinds of meetings are not efficient. Another story: my father was a carpenter, and he had his workshop in the ground floor of the house, and then we had the flat on the next floor up. And sometimes when it was time for lunch, my father was late, and the typical excuse was he was gluing a chair. If you're gluing a chair, you cannot stop that. If you stop it, your chair is ruined. So you finish it. And maybe it takes half an hour, maybe it takes 40 minutes, and that's a block that you cannot break. And Paul Graham has a great blog post on a similar topic when he's talking about maker's schedule and manager's schedule. On a maker's schedule, like this person who's crafting wood, if you're interrupted, it can be very expensive because you are in the flow. For a developer, software developer, if you have a meeting at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, very often your afternoon is ruined. Because, before the meeting, you say, meeting at 3 p.m., I'm not starting that. After the meeting, you say, I'll soon go home, I'm not starting that. You don't start it, you don't do it. If you had your whole afternoon, you'd be efficient, in the zone, doing something. So on a maker's schedule, a meeting can ruin half a day, and it's very expensive. On a manager's schedule, if a manager is in meetings all week, if they have one more meeting, it's one more slot. Well, no problem. It's not the same cost, and we have to be aware of that. So meetings are very expensive. I would like us, when you have a meeting, you should have like a parking meter, where you have to put money. And if you don't put enough money, the meeting stops. And this would make us realize how expensive meetings are. So I'm not saying you should not do meetings. I'm saying you should be very careful about which meetings you organize and how you organize them so they are efficient. There's so many ways a meeting can fail. I forgot to invite Bob. Oh, Bob forgot to come. Oh, what's this meeting about? Are we deciding? We decide next week. There's so many. If you look around the web, there's tons of videos, some of them funny, some of them very sad, about failing meetings. So I'm not saying don't do meetings. I'm saying be very careful. And if a meeting is on video or in person, doesn't change much. On a video meeting, you're also not supposed not to do something else. So your mind is busy and you're not, it takes your time. But still, remember the dam building example. When we can do a meeting, that's when we can do our best work very often, if it's a great meeting. So be very careful, and that would be my first recommendation. Be very careful how you organize and when and how many meetings you organize. Some companies say no meetings on Friday, no meetings on Tuesday. I think that's nice. It helps you put the meetings in, realize the importance of them, and maybe have some breaks where you can dedicate yourself to other things. I'm doing good. If you're wondering what the small numbers are at the bottom of this section slides, it's the timings. I'm supposed to start this at 11:32, 16 seconds late, not doing bad. Asynchronous decisions are a great way to avoid inefficient meetings. Software is made out of decisions. If you look at your software architecture, the design of your modules, the implementation, it's decisions all the way down. Which language, which library, which framework, how do I design this module? You're making decisions all the time. And if it's a group effort, you're making group decisions, hopefully. At least the important decisions, you make them in a group. Yesterday morning, this was this great keynote on speaking about the advice process, where everybody can make a decision, but you have to ask others, the affected people or the experts, what do they think? So the decision process is at the core of what we do. And a decision, if you think about what's a decision or what's the process for making a decision, I see 4 phases. First, you brainstorm, crazy ideas, whatever, tell it, how can we do this, which library, and maybe you have 100 choices at worst, I don't know, but you have many choices at this point. And some of them are valid, some of them are not. Then you move to the second phase. Define the options. What are the valid options based on this brainstorming, lots of ideas, which are the ones which might bring us to a good decision? And ideally at this point you want maybe 4 to 7, 7 is a lot. So usually we say for our brains, and this resonates with what Simone was saying yesterday about our brain, we have like 2 to 6 slots in our brain for such things. So if you can, reduce this to maximum of 6, 7 decisions, hopefully a bit less, that's good. But then you have your options, and then everybody can study the options, and then that's the next phase. You build consensus. You discuss the options. Some of them might be obviously not good, so okay, no, not this one. Others are, someone will argue about this option. I think it's good because of this and this. So this helps you refine, and hopefully you build consensus. In open source projects, in the Apache Software Foundation, we have defined voting decision process. But ideally, you don't use it. Ideally, you reach a natural consensus. You discuss in your team, and one or the option emerges as the best. That's the ideal case. If not, sometimes you disagree, you still need to move forward. It's a business. We're not here just for fun. We have to sell stuff to customers and get money so that our families can live. So you need to move forward. You cannot stay stuck. And that's sometimes a criticism that's made for open source projects. It's too slow. So you have to be able to break the ties or break the indecision. So in Apache, the rule is that you will hold a vote. And then, okay, at least the decision is made and you can go forward. So ideally, you just do a consensus. If not, you have a vote. And then you have your decision. All of this can happen asynchronously. If you can do it together in a room, it's great. If you can't, well, it's not too hard to organize this in an async fashion. You need two tools. I'm purposely not showing very complex digital tools, but the spirit of the tool. On the left is a marine radio. If you're sailing, with a marine radio, you call on channel 16. Everybody hears that. And you say, hey, I need help, my my engine is broken, I need a tow. And then someone will answer and say, okay, Bertrand, we switch to channel 11. So you free the broadcast channel and you go to a different channel. It's very similar to what we need to do. You need to broadcast your intentions. We need to decide what library we're going to use. And join me in issue 1234 to discuss this. And that's the two main tools you can use to make decisions. A broadcast channel to announce the decisions and intentions, and then what I call a case management tool. An issue tracker is great for that, or Git the discussions or something like that. Can be a mailing list, can be shared documents. There's many tools which can work for that. But it's really the spirit, the type of tools that you need. It could work on paper, but of course then you will need to grab the paper. I worked for the Swiss Parliament and Swiss government about 20 years ago, and I created an application that they use to organize their weekly meeting of the Swiss Federal Council. So the Switzerland is governed by a council of 7 people, which is called the Federal Council, and they meet every week. And I didn't realize, it took me a long time to realize that they work in a similar way than the Apache Software Foundation Board of Directors, in that their meeting is a hybrid of asynchronous and synchronous work. The way it works, they meet every week about 4 hours, and they take 70 decisions in 4 hours, which is, good performance. Why? Because a lot of this is prepared in advance. And when they arrive at the meeting, they have 4 lists of items colored. The orange list is the items which are uncontested. So the president will say, page 1, does everybody agree? Yes. Okay, done, ratified. And it goes very fast. And then you have the other lists which have items which might need more time or are confidential, which need to be processed specially. But it's a very simple process. It's not very digital. It's digital, before, for the preparation. Of course, the software that I did was, digital, of course. But then the process for the meeting is pretty manual and simple. And it's a combination of asynchronous and synchronous. They need to do some synchronous work because of their, their official process. They need to ratify the decisions. So async decisions can work in a pretty simple way. This is a talk which is more about the various aspects. So I don't have time to go deeper into this, but I'll share links where I have talks which are more specific to that if you're interested. So, okay, we are being careful about meetings. We have tools for asynchronous decisions, and or principles for asynchronous decisions that's starting to help us. And then often the big question is, okay, but which tools? Do you use Slack? Use something else? We're geeks, so we're often very attached to our tools, and that's often a difficult question. So I'll present my view of that, and again, I'll try to stick to first principles. Without getting into the tool wars. This is a mailing list. Sometimes I might sound like an old fart, but it's still working very well. Many projects use that, and it doesn't really matter actually exactly which channel that is, but what it is, it's an asynchronous channel. It's threaded. You have threaded discussions with titles. So if the title is well written, it helps you to see, oh, this discussion is for me, this one is not. Helps you skim the things much faster. And here it's the OpenStack list. They've been using tags in square brackets, tags in subject lines forever. And this is very powerful. Of course, you have better tools today which do that in a similar way, but the principle is asynchronous threaded channel with tagged subject lines. I think that's a fantastic async collaboration tool. Depending, can be implemented by different actual tools. The second tool that I think is very useful is the issue tracker, or GitHub discussions. Nowadays is a bit more geared toward discussions, but it's pretty similar. Basically, the idea is that you have one page per topic, one page per decision, one persistent URL per decision, and it helps organize the whole thing. Today, we have to discuss -1, 2, 3, 4, and everybody knows exactly what it is because it's a simple persistent URL. I'm also a big fan of using tags in these decision pages to navigate and find them easily. So I think that can work very well. And one of the challenges we see with mailing lists, with email, is that the quoting. You need lots of discipline to get the quoting right. And for example, GitHub issues make that easier. Or I think people tend to use better quoting, and then it leads to more precise discussions. Chat is very popular nowadays. Many people use Slack for collaboration. It can work, but I think you have to realize that chat inherently is here now. Chat is meant for synchronous discussions. You can make it work asynchronously, but it needs lots of discipline. So if you're careful, it can work, but I'm often seeing that it doesn't work. That you come back after 10 days. As you understood, I go sailing sometimes, so I'm off to sea for 2 weeks, and then I come back, and then you look at the Slack channels, and it makes no sense. Or you have to reread everything, which doesn't work. So I think for me, I prefer using chat for the quick, short-lived discussions. And if I think this discussion will be valid for more than 2 days, I switch to something else. Issue tracker, discussions, maybe shared documents, whatever. But I think you have to be careful about, if you use chat, you're a bit fighting against the basis of chat, which is synchronous. So you have to be careful. Shared documents can work. You can totally discuss something in a document as long as it's centrally shared, as everybody is really accessing the same document with the same URL, and it's the same thing that you're working on. Sometimes people will send documents around in email, and you probably know this doesn't work because you end up with multiple copies, which are very hard to reconcile. So really, if you do shared documents, if for example, you do Markdown in a Git repository, it can work fantastically. And that might be a next step, maybe. Maybe you did the initial discussion in a chat. It's a bit messy, but it helps you brainstorm. Maybe you move to the issue tracker to clarify the decision. And maybe you create a document at the end because it's important and you want to do an architecture decision record or something. It can be a combination. For me, these are the basic tools. But again, what you actually need, if you want to stick to first principles for asynchronous decision making, is a broadcast channel where you can advertise things, ping people. I need someone to look at this decision, please. And then the case management tool where you segregate discussions into their own pages, discussions and decisions, and then you can work in a smaller team on what you need to do. So this was we are progressing. Hopefully. So we're being careful about meetings. We are making decisions asynchronously, which means we don't have to be synchronously connected often, or not at all in the worst case. And we have tools to do that. And one next step, which I think is very important, is how you write. Because you're going to be writing a lot of text in these different channels. You're going to be writing chat messages, maybe emails. You're going to be writing in issue trackers, quoting what someone else said, and so on. So it's a lot of writing, and I think it's really worth it to work on your writing and to be efficient. One example that I take. So first thing to note is that you're writing for an audience. If you're in a team of 20 people, there's one person writing and 19 people reading. If each of them wastes 5 minutes because your writing is not good. That's 19 times 5 minutes that's wasted for your organization. It's not good. If you spend 5 minutes more writing it better, they would save the time. And overall, your team would be more efficient. So I think it's really, you need to realize you are writing for an audience, and so you have to be careful and maybe spend more time and energy on how you write. The example that I take here is IMDb, the website that references movies. This is a movie that we enjoyed watching with my wife. She said, "Are you really going to tell them about this movie? Is it really okay?" It's fine. I found it fun. Whatever. It doesn't matter exactly what the movie is about. What I wanted to explain here is the structure of this page, because our messages can have a similar structure. It has a title. Okay, I see the title of the movie. Whatever works. Sounds interesting, intriguing. I want to know more. I look at the rest of the page. Then you have the abstract, the synopsis of the movie here under the video. Middle-aged, misanthropic divorcee from New York City and so on. Gives you a bit more information. Allows you to decide if you want to dig deeper or not. Maybe you read the abstract and say, no, I don't like these kinds of movies. Sounds like a Woody Allen movie. That's not for me. And you go away. Or I read it and say, sounds like a Woody Allen movie. I want to know more. Second stage of decision. First stage, title, then the abstract, then the trailer. You can watch the trailer of the movie, gives you even more information, allows you to decide if you want to dig deeper or not. And I think it's super efficient if we can reproduce this same multi-level decision process in our written communications. If I write an email to several people, I'm very careful about the subject line because it's the first thing that you see and the first thing that allows you to decide to dig in deeper or not. Maybe you see the subject line, this is about the memory leak in the Log4j library. That's not my domain. I don't care. I'm not going to read that. You spend 3 seconds reading the title and you're out. So you didn't waste your time. And then I will write the body of the message, and let me give you an example of how this can look. This is a message that I wrote to an Apache Software Foundation mailing list about the website. And we were working on the SF board website, and I had some new content that I wanted people to review. And this is an example of a message that took me maybe 10 to 15 minutes to write. But I think it's well crafted, and I think it helps my colleagues not waste their time with this message. First thing, the subject line at the top is very explicit. It's about the website in brackets, tag. Not interested in the website? Okay, no way, you can ignore that. And then please review the stage board content. Someone who doesn't have time to review, they will decide at this point to drop off. Try to give as much information as you can in the subject line. Then my message has an introduction. I'm saying hi because I'm polite. And then as an introduction, that section of the website is currently built from SVN, and it kind of contextualize. And also this gives the next level. The reader can decide to, progress, read more or not, decide if they're interested or not. And then I have the body and references, which is the details of what I did, the details of what I want people to review with links, so there's no ambiguity. They can look at the links, and I know they're going to look at the right stuff, and so on. And then the last part was what's next. And I say, I'll wait for the discussion, if any, to settle down before letting infra actually activate this setup. So I'm telling people, what is this about, roughly? What's the context? What did I do? What do I expect you to do? And then what am I going to do next? It's one message. If you're not careful, getting the same information across to your team might take 10 messages. Or if it's on chat and you start with hi, you already wasted 2 messages because people will reply hi. You know how it works. So trying to write such self-contained messages with multi-level decision points for people to decide to read or not can be super efficient. It's more work for you. But again, if you're addressing a group of 50 people, you're saving time for these 50 people, so it's worth your time. Unless you consider yourself super important, like a principal scientist that doesn't have time to waste for that. It's not my style. So I think it's really worth, taking time to craft your messages. And even if it's on chat, you can do the same thing on Slack. What I do on Slack at work now, I always start my threads with a single message with a thread emoji, subject line, and then I reply to this message with the start of the thread. Forces people to use threads, which is already a benefit on Slack. There's tricks like that you can do to drive the discussion in a sane way and help your colleagues be efficient. Then, of course, if you want to be concise, you have to write concisely. On the left, you see the text that I wrote in the previous message, provide readers in the previous slide. And on the right, you could also have written it like that. It's often a good idea to make sure people who are reading your message have multiple options, decision points, where they can opt to stop reading the rest of your message. If they are not interested in more than the current level of detail, they can stop reading to avoid using more energy and time than strictly needed. I hope I'm being clear. You understand what I'm saying, but it's so much more, energy than to say provide readers with multiple decision points to stop reading if not interested in the next level of detail. There's exactly the same amount of information on both sides. Just the left one is more concise. It takes effort. It's something that you need to learn, work on, and hone, over time. I think it's really worth it if you work in a distributed team. More efficient writing will help you be more efficient. Also helps clarify your thinking often. By writing clearly, helps you thinking clearly. So I think that's something worth working on. And there, you find many references, writing classes, writing tutorials to help you with that. One last thing that I wanted to mention on the clarity in the clarity section is the concept of radiating intent. In my message about the website 2 slides before, the last section was about what am I going to do next? I'll wait 24 hours, and if no one objects, I'm going to commit these changes. Radiating intent. You indicate what's your intent, and unless someone objects, you do it. I'm also a cyclist. I commute a lot by bicycle. And if you want to stay, I'm a live cyclist, which is really cool. If you want to stay live as a cyclist in a city, you have to be very clear. You have to be very clear about your intentions. I'm going right. I'm going left. I'm stopping. This is what people use in Denmark, in Copenhagen, to indicate I'm stopping. It's super, it helps you stay alive. And in our teams, it's the same thing. Unless, instead of asking for permission or waiting for your manager's permission, you radiate your intentions. You express your intentions in a way that allows people to object. There's a fantastic book on that by David Marquet, who was a captain in the US Army, called Turn the Ship Around. And he's been applying these principles in the military, which is the ultimate, hierarchical organization. He was encouraging his soldiers to say, Captain, I intend to turn the submarine 10 degrees to starboard. And, the captain can object, say, no, you don't do that, or say, okay, fine, go ahead, do it. It's much more efficient than asking, Captain, I would like to turn to starboard, would you agree with it? I don't know how much you want to turn. Oh, I don't know, maybe 10 degrees? Okay, 10 degrees is fine, go. 6 messages instead of 2. And also by using this mechanism, you empower people to make decisions. You say, okay, you can make decisions. Just tell me what you're about to do before you do it, and then I can object if needed. So I think that's also a super efficient way of making our distributed teams more efficient by writing these self-contained messages where you give context in multiple sections and you radiate intent. It's not complicated. It just takes a bit more time to think about it, and the more you do it, the more it will become natural, and your team will become more efficient. And we're coming to the last chapter of this talk, which is the multicultural teams. It's very common nowadays to have to work in a multicultural team. And if I ask you, what's your culture? People will often answer, I'm German, I'm from London, I'm French, je suis français. But is there anyone in the audience who's a drummer? Yes, you're my friend. I'm also a drummer. A drummer is a culture. You know, when I'm at a restaurant with my grandson, we start drumming on the table. You know, it's a culture. Soccer fans is a culture. I'm totally clueless about soccer. Sometimes there's discussions on the train, and I don't belong here. I can't say anything. So culture is much more. Also, have a talk on this. Culture is much more than just where you come from, what language you speak. There's many different angles to the culture. Managers can have their own culture compared to engineers. And older folks like me have maybe a slightly different culture that people here who are half my age or less. It's very subtle. In my talk on the multicultural teams, I'm telling a sad story. I don't know if you know about Costa Concordia. It was 12, 15 years ago maybe. This big ship that crashed on the island of Giglio in Italy. And it's very sad because if you look, so when there's a ship crash like that, there's a public incident report, and I read that. Didn't read all of it, but I read most of it, and it's enlightening because, so as a sailor, I understand what the chart means. You know what the navigation, how you're supposed to plot your navigation on a chart, and the chart that the captain used in this case, I wouldn't use it myself on a 40-foot boat. You know, it's really, he was wanting to pass very close to the rocks. There was wind, 25 knots, pushing the boat on the rocks. And the chart was kind of a, wild piece of paper, old, not up to date, whatever, really bad work from the captain's side. And nobody challenged him. You know, you don't have just a captain on the boat. You have first officer, first mate. You have several people who could have said, Captain, I'm sorry, respectfully, I don't think this is safe. I think we should do it differently. Didn't happen. You know, and this tells a lot about the work culture. On this ship, also, if you look in the report, there was, in the ship's personnel, there were 38 nationalities, which is a challenge in itself. The working language, the official working language was Italian, because the ship is under Italian flag. And Italian is a very nice language. Mi piace molto italiano. It's not a very common language. There's probably many more people who speak English, even if it's bad English, on the globe than Italian. So what happens? They spoke in English. At the trial, the helmsman, the guy who was steering the boat when the crash happened, testified that he often did not understand the orders given by the captain in English. You know, how bad it is. And that's really, a place where you should have been more careful about the multicultural aspects and, decide on a language, on an official language that's realistic, and maybe define that language. And that's another great example. The aviation industry has defined a standard, simplified technical English for the airplanes manuals, operation manuals, maintenance manuals and stuff. So it's a bit similar to my concise example here, but it's simply a simpler way. Lauren was talking this morning in the docs session about 8th grade English. It might be similar to that. Just use, because we're communicating in English, because for many of us it's not our first language, just use simple language. Stick to simple constructions, short phrases, short paragraphs, and maybe look at this standard, for example, and try to take inspiration from it. I think this can be very helpful in a multicultural setting, just in terms of better trying to understand each other. But of course, language is just one thing. In the culture, other things get in the way where in a multicultural setting. Where I come from, we have a joke, and where we ask, it's a guess actually, what's the difference between a duck? And when you ask that, people say, what's the difference between a duck and what? No, what's the difference between a duck? Both legs are the same length, especially the left one. When you tell a joke like that, some people will find it funny. Some people will ask, is that even a joke? some people, okay, this one is not an offending one, but it's also very easy to offend people with jokes. So you have to be very careful with jokes and irony and that kind of stuff in a multicultural setting is very dangerous. It's a slippery slope. So sometimes you just have to refrain from that. Or maybe you use the jokes when you're together, you're drinking something together with your colleagues, then it's less risky because you will see the faces. You start telling the joke and someone's, no, okay, I'll stop. I'll tell you another joke. I have a good joke about ducks. So you have to be very careful in a multicultural setting, and it's not just about the language. There's many aspects which get in the way. So I think you have to assume good intentions. If you get an email or a chat message and you feel attacked, maybe the person is not willing to attack you. Maybe it's just because of their culture that they're expressing themselves like that. Maybe they're also having a bad day, which can happen. So instead of attacking them back, you might reformulate, or do I understand correctly that you're saying this and this? And this will help you get on common ground. And we see this very often in open source projects, mailing lists or channels, where someone feels attacked and another one says, no, he's just being realistic or a bit provocative on purpose. And this is much harder in written form. This is much harder in written asynchronous form than face-to-face. So you have to be very careful. So assume good intentions, ask for clarification, reformulate. Of course, you need this all the time, but it's even, I think in a multicultural setting, it's even more important. So I'm doing good on time. See, my 00 was supposed to finish at noon sharp. 1 minute 37 late, that's okay. So this is my coda. So again, distributed teams mean many challenges. I don't have all the answers. I hope that the pointers to tools and techniques that I give you will be useful. As I said, I have other more detailed talks on the same topics. This QR code gets to my blog where you can find references. In the About page on the blog, there's a link to what I call my press book, which has links to previous talks and videos and interviews and stuff, which might be useful. So to overcome these challenges, I think it's very important to focus on the first principles rather than tools. Very often we try to be dragged on discussions about tools. Yeah, do you want to? No, we should use Slack. We should use Issue Tracker. Try to focus on the first principles. What will make us more efficient in making decisions? And then there's many ways to do that, and you have to find one that works for your team. And don't forget to get together when you can. Of course, it's working remotely is super efficient in terms of quality of life, efficiency, asynchronously, working when you feel good about working and stuff. So I've been doing that more or less forever in my career. So I'm a big fan of that. But I'm also a big fan of efficient meetings, efficient get-togethers, either on video as a second class or first class meeting like here together. So we have to find a balance and define a budget. What's a good budget for getting together so that your teams stays efficient. So that's all. That's all I had to say on this overview of the challenges of distributed teams. We have a few minutes for questions, if you have any, or comments. Yes, we have one here.
Thank you very much. Really interesting. With async decisions, how do you get over the issue of no consensus, which is, I guess, something that I've seen quite often as a challenge, and that's when I find the desire to bring people into a room. So what if there's no consensus?
So basically, how can you handle the case when there is where you cannot reach a consensus? Yeah, it's obviously a challenge. So as I said, in the SF, we have the voting rules, which says it's important to move forward. So at some point, you need to make a decision. If it's in a company, sometimes the manager makes the decision, if they're qualified to do that, if they have the respect of the others, which is the best manager, if you can have that. Otherwise, what we do in the SF in open source projects is a vote. Then we have very well-defined voting rules in the SF. You have a vote of the PMC members, so the project management committee, members who are recognized to have decision power on this project. And then you have to have 3+1s and more +1s than -1s. You have to have a majority vote. We don't do vetoes in the ASF for technical concerns because it blocks progress. So if you want to veto a commit, you have to give a technical justification. So I think that can be a good starting rule. Hopefully you use that rarely, because it can be it can make people unhappy because their decision was not accepted. But also you need to move forward. So I'd say in a business setting, it might be the manager. Hopefully the manager is respected and has technical kudos that people will recognize, or otherwise you have to define mechanisms such as voting. We do that a lot in Switzerland as well. Switzerland is, it's a people's power in theory, so we do a lot of voting. Yeah, we have a question here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I was very interested in the meeting part. And how do you handle one-to-one meetings? Do you classify them as regular meetings you've been talking about? And how do you balance other communication like chat, emails, and face-to-face meeting in video conference or things like that?
Yeah. So the one-to-one meetings or the one-to-one discussions, I think if it's about technical topics, we should avoid them. It's much more efficient to talk to the project. What I see very often, I see the wrong question. Who should I ask about this? Ask Bob. He's a specialist of memory leaks. Okay. But maybe Jim also has a great idea. Or maybe Jill is new in the team and she would like to also get more involved in memory leaks discussions. So in Apache, in ESF, we say if it didn't happen on the dev list, it didn't happen. Meaning all the technical discussions should be exposed to the project. And I think you should refrain from having one-to-one technical discussions. Then one-to-one, of course, one-to-one coffee is fantastic. You should set that up as much as you can. One-to-one discussions with your managers are important because there's some aspect of confidentiality. So I would say, for me, the one-to-ones are more on a social or organizational aspect, but for the technical discussions, I refrain from doing one-to-one. Yes?
I have a question about this.
Sorry, the mic is on the back.
Sorry.
You'll be next.
Yeah,
Yes?
I just wanted to ask about, what's your opinion of having more office days for the aspect of junior developers' development and progress?
So requiring the junior developers to come more in the office initially?
Well, I mean, if the team has more junior developers, they're asked to come to office more often because that can help the junior developers to progress faster and better.
So how you balance office space with remote? Is that?
Well, the question is, do you believe that junior developers can progress better and faster if they work in the office?
Yes. Yeah. So if you're a beginner in some technology, it's obviously more efficient if you can be co-located with people who can coach and mentor you. So if you can organize that, that's great. Depending on your setup, you can't. So if you can't, you should try to reproduce that. Some colleagues have been using open video channels. So they just leave, if say 2-3 people are working in the same place and 2 others in a different place, they just leave a video link open all the time. So then you can pass by video and try to have the kind of spontaneous conversations. But I agree that, when you're beginning, if you can be in the office, it can be more efficient. Maybe not all the time, maybe define 2 weeks per month or 1 week per month or 2 days per week. There's different options. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there's.
Do you believe it's because of the current tools that we are using is lacking that possibility? Do you think in the future, 10 years, 50 years, we're going to be able to work completely remotely because of them?
I'm not a psychology specialist, so I don't know what really makes a difference, but we're obviously more efficient when we're together. And there's something to do with the body language, with the super quick interactions, with the feedback you get from the people's tone of voice, which is very hard to reproduce with the tools that we have today. So hopefully it will get better. When I started, we only had expensive phone calls. If I wanted to collaborate with someone in California, I had to call them and it would cost like $2 a minute. So it's already much better today that we have free video. So it is evolving. So we can hope that it will get better. Yeah, and also because we learn, and the younger generations will be more used to that. So maybe they'll be more efficient than my generation at doing that. I don't know. Yes?
So this example with a ship with 34 nationalities, to me it represents any open source project or enterprise. So I'm quite frightened now. So what is your advice to make sure we benefit from diversity and not end up like this captain?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so the multicultural aspects, as you're saying, that's a big asset. It's fantastic because, you tend, I know I have some colleagues who have a different background and culture, and we always disagree initially. If you ask us a question, a technical question, generally you get two opposing answers. But we're used to discussing together. We know that we have different backgrounds, and we're used to trying to find what's best for the project. So I think you really have to establish that culture in your team, that cultural differences are given. We have to cope with them, which means that when we are discussing together, it's a bit like the United Nations. You have to be more careful. I cannot do, there are some jokes that I will do with my Swiss-French colleagues that I will not do with my German colleagues. Or if I'm discussing and this whole team is here, I'll tone it down. I'll be more careful about my tone and jokes and stuff. So I think you really have to, it's something that the team really has to learn, how to cope with a multicultural environment. Sometimes it's a bit frustrating. I hate being politically correct. But sometimes when I'm writing to a large mailing list, I have to. I would like, this is a good joke. I would like to make it. No, I don't make it. I just write something a bit less entertaining, but efficient. And I think it's really something that you have to teach, that the team has to learn as part of what they learn. Yeah. One more question? Yeah?
How do you deal with people that aren't used to your process? So you could have this process in your team, it all works great. You set up something for async communication. They just ping you on Slack and say, what's going on with this decision that's been happening?
Yeah.
Do you spend all your time trying to train people, or how do you deal with that?
Over the years, I've been collecting a few, maybe I don't know if I should tell you that. I've been collecting a few tricks to handle that. And it's the same thing when you have this friend who's always pinging you on WhatsApp about things that are not interesting, or, or they're interrupting. I use timing a lot. If someone asks me a one-to-one question on Slack that should be in a more open channel, I will not answer now. Let's wait after lunch. And if the same person asks a question on the open channel 5 minutes later, I respond immediately. It's a signal that I'm putting my attention and my effort where it's worth it. And because you asked me this question on the open channel, my time is more worth it here than in a one-to-one where nobody benefits from the answer. And you can use, when you're a consultant, there's always a fine line between helping people and manipulating. So you have to be respectful. But, or sometimes I will just answer on the public, on the more open channel, saying, I don't want to embarrass people, so I'm not going to say who it was, but I'm going to say, someone asked me this in a one-to-one message. I'm replying here so that it's useful for others. It's also Simon who was telling that yesterday in a talk about the brain. If a kid does something wrong, you shouldn't, for example, if my grandson calls the cat a towel, I shouldn't say, no, it's not a towel, it's a cat. I can say, oh, let me pick up that cat for you. You're not saying this is wrong. You're showing the better way to do it. And I think you can use similar techniques to gradually steer people toward what you think is the right way. It's a challenge. It's not, it's not also a full-fledged recipe. So I think we're at time. I'll be here until tomorrow morning. So if you have more questions, feel free to grab me. And I signed up for Blind Ignite tonight, so if you want see me get embarrassed on stage or not, be there. Thank you.